Marlon Brando wasn't just one of the greatest actors ever. He was also known for his brutal honesty and sharp tongue. He didn't hold back when it came to calling out his fellow stars, and some actors made his blood boil. So, who were the 7 actors Marlon Brando actually hated the most, and what made him despise them? James Dean, rivalry or respect? Marlon Brando and James Dean are 2 of the most iconic names in Hollywood history, each known for redefining acting in their own way. But behind the fame and the admiration, there was a complicated relationship that many have described as tense, if not outright hostile. People often wonder whether Brando truly hated Dean or if their story was more about rivalry mixed with a reluctant respect. At first glance, it's easy to assume that 2 young, rebellious actors trying to make their mark might naturally clash. James Dean was the rising star of the 1950s, capturing the attention of a generation with his brooding looks and raw emotional style. Brando, who had already established himself as a groundbreaking figure with films like A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront, was seen as a pioneer in method acting. Both men shared a certain intensity and a refusal to conform to Hollywood's expectations, yet their paths and personalities set them apart in significant ways. Reports from the era suggest that Brando wasn't fond of Dean, but it's important to understand what that really meant. Brando wasn't known for hating people lightly, but when he did take issue with someone, it often came from a place of artistic frustration rather than simple dislike. Dean represented a younger generation of actors who were influenced by Brando's style, but also brought their own flair and energy. Brando, known for his serious and sometimes brooding nature, may have seen Dean's fame as more of a fleeting phenomenon, driven by image and media hype rather than solid craftsmanship. There's an interesting story where Brando was once asked about Dean during an interview, and his response was surprisingly lukewarm. Instead of dismissing Dean outright, Brando spoke about the pressure the young actor faced and hinted at the fragility behind Dean's rebellious exterior. It was a rare moment where Brando's tone softened, suggesting that whatever his issues with Dean, there was also a recognition of the young man's talent and struggle. This hints that any so-called hatred was not purely personal, but rather tied to complex feelings about the acting world and the kind of fame Dean was getting. One of the few concrete examples of tension came from an incident on the set of Rebel Without a Cause. Although Brando wasn't directly involved in that film, stories have circulated about him criticizing the way Dean's performances were received by critics and audiences. Brando reportedly felt that Dean was being celebrated more for his looks and the tragic story surrounding him than for his actual skills as an actor. This wasn't unusual for Brando, who often expressed frustration when he thought the craft of acting was being overshadowed by celebrity or gimmicks. Still, the idea that Brando outright hated Dean is an oversimplification. From what's been shared by those close to Brando and documented in interviews, the relationship was more nuanced. There was a sense of rivalry because both were navigating the same space, but there was also a grudging respect. Brando seemed to recognize Dean's impact on the industry, even if he questioned the depth of his talent or the nature of his fame. In the years following Dean's untimely death, Brando's comments became more reflective. He acknowledged that Dean had a rare quality and a vulnerability that audiences connected with. Whether or not Brando's initial feelings were rooted in jealousy or disappointment, time appeared to bring a softer view. He seemed to appreciate Dean as someone who had changed Hollywood, even if that change wasn't exactly what Brando himself would have chosen. Understanding this dynamic helps paint a clearer picture of Brando's personality. He was not a man who held simple grudges, but rather someone deeply invested in the art of acting and fiercely protective of what he saw as its integrity. Dean challenged that integrity in some ways, not because he was a bad actor, but because he symbolized a new wave of fame and style that Brando found unsettling. So, while many headlines over the years have claimed that Marlon Brando hated James Dean, the reality was more complex. It was a mixture of rivalry, skepticism, and ultimately, respect. Brando's true feelings reflected his complicated view of Hollywood itself, a world where talent and image often collided, sometimes uncomfortably. Moving from the young rebel Dean, Brando's animosity extended to others whose acting styles or personas clashed with his own. Laurence Olivier, clashing titans. Marlon Brando and Laurence Olivier were both giants in the acting world, but they represented very different traditions and styles. Olivier was the epitome of classical acting, trained in the theater, especially Shakespeare, and known for his polished, refined performances. Brando, on the other hand, brought a fresh, raw energy with his method acting approach, which focused on emotional truth and deep personal connection to the character. This fundamental difference shaped how the two viewed each other and the craft itself. Olivier's style was rooted in discipline and technique, often praised for his commanding presence and control. His performances were carefully crafted, with every gesture and line delivery honed to perfection. Brando's method acting rejected much of this formalism. He believed in living the character's emotions in a natural and spontaneous way rather than performing them. This sometimes meant breaking the rules of classical acting and upsetting traditionalists. To Brando, acting was not about polished delivery, but about authenticity and raw feeling. Because of this divide, there was an inevitable friction between them. Olivier represented the old guard of acting, while Brando was the new wave challenging the status quo. Their clashes were not just about technique, but about what acting should be. Brando wasn't shy about expressing his opinions on Olivier's style, which he sometimes found too controlled and artificial. He saw Olivier's approach as too polished, lacking the grit and reality that Brando prized. Some accounts suggest that Brando considered Olivier somewhat of a showman, more focused on style than substance. While Olivier was respected by many for his talent and achievements, Brando's admiration came with reservations. There was a sense that Brando felt Olivier's work, although brilliant in its way, wasn't as emotionally truthful as his own method. Interestingly, Olivier seemed to respect Brando's talent, even if he didn't fully approve of his style. Their relationship was complicated, a mix of mutual recognition and professional rivalry. Olivier once remarked that Brando had an intense naturalism that was hard to teach, while Brando quietly criticized the theatricality of Olivier's performances. There's a famous anecdote from the set of the film The Score, where both actors appeared. Although they didn't share many scenes, people noticed the differences in their approach. Olivier stuck to a more traditional acting style, while Brando remained deeply immersed in his character's psychology, sometimes improvising or reacting in ways that seemed unpredictable. This contrast highlighted their distinct acting philosophies. In interviews, Brando was sometimes blunt about his views on Olivier. He hinted that Olivier's style was too polished for the gritty reality Brando wanted to portray on screen. Brando's admiration for naturalism made him skeptical of the classical acting approach, which he felt often created a distance between the actor and the audience. Still, Brando never dismissed Olivier as unworthy. He understood that Olivier's craft had a place, especially in theater and period pieces, but it was clear Brando thought acting had to evolve. He wanted film acting to be more immediate, emotional, and real, something Olivier's style didn't always capture in his eyes. This clash of philosophies wasn't just a personal issue, but reflected a larger shift in acting during the mid-20th century. Brando and Olivier symbolized two different eras and two different ideas of what it meant to be an actor. Brando's challenge to the classical style pushed the industry to reconsider what acting could be, even if it meant upsetting some of the established stars like Olivier. The tension between these two titans shows how acting isn't just about talent, but about vision and values. Both contributed massively to the craft, but from very different perspectives, which naturally led to disagreements and some measure of dislike. Next on the list is someone whose star power and public persona clearly rubbed Brando the wrong way. Kirk Douglas, Hollywood toughness tested. Both had strong personalities and were known for their toughness, but their clashes went beyond just egos. The dynamic between them was shaped by competition, conflicting styles, and personal disagreements that added fuel to the fire of their mutual dislike. Kirk Douglas had a reputation as a hard-working, no-nonsense actor who built his career on determination and grit. He was the classic leading man of his time, tough, charismatic, and confident. Brando, in contrast, represented a more naturalistic, emotionally driven approach to acting. While both commanded attention, their methods and attitudes couldn't have been more different. Douglas's style was polished and forceful, often portraying strong, heroic characters, while Brando was more unpredictable and raw, focusing on internal complexity. Their paths crossed multiple times, and it wasn't always friendly. There were rumors of friction during various film projects and public appearances. Some of their disagreements came down to competition for similar roles and status in the industry. Both wanted to be seen as the top actor of their generation, which naturally led to clashes behind the scenes. One of the most talked about stories comes from the set of The Brotherhood in 1968. Although Brando wasn't in the film, Douglas reportedly criticized Brando's methods and attitude in interviews around that time. Douglas viewed Brando as difficult and self-absorbed, accusing him of being unpredictable and hard to work with. Brando, in turn, didn't hide his disdain for Douglas's public persona, which he felt was too controlled and superficial. It was a classic case of two big personalities not fitting well in the same space. Brando's dislike for Douglas may have gone beyond professional rivalry. Douglas was known for being aggressive in promoting himself, which ran counter to Brando's more private and introspective style. Brando disliked what he saw as Douglas's tendency to chase fame and use a tough guy image to maintain his status. To Brando, this felt like a mask that hid a lack of genuine emotion, something Brando held as the core of good acting. In interviews, Brando occasionally hinted that Douglas's toughness was more about show than substance. He thought Douglas put too much emphasis on physical presence and charm, without enough attention to the inner life of a character. Brando often stressed the importance of authenticity in acting, and in his eyes, Douglas's performances sometimes came off as surface level or rehearsed rather than truly lived. Douglas, for his part, didn't shy away from calling out Brando's eccentricities and mood swings. He described Brando as brilliant but hard to predict, sometimes accusing him of being self-centered to the point of disrupting productions. Their relationship was a mix of respect for each other's talents and frustration with one another's personalities. What's interesting is that the tension between them reflects more than just personal dislike. It highlights different views about what made an actor great. Brando wanted depth and honesty, while Douglas valued strength and control. Both approaches found success, but the clash between them was almost inevitable. Over the years, their rivalry was discussed by Hollywood insiders and biographers who noted how their conflicts mirrored the larger changes in the film industry. Brando was pushing acting into new emotional territories, while Douglas was holding on to the traditional leading man image. This struggle wasn't just about two men, but about what Hollywood itself was becoming. Despite the harsh words and public jabs, there was a grudging acknowledgement of talent on both sides. Neither could deny the other's influence or success. But for Brando, Douglas represented much of what he disliked about Hollywood's focus on image over substance. As we move forward, Brando's issues with certain actors reveal more about his views on authenticity and ego. Charlton Heston, political and personal differences. This contrast played a huge part in the tension between the two men, making their relationship less about professional rivalry and more about a fundamental clash of values. Brando was known for his outspoken activism, especially during the turbulent 1960s and 70s. He used his platform to highlight civil rights, Native American issues, and anti-war causes. One of the most famous moments showing Brando's bold stance came at the 1973 Oscars, when he refused to accept the Best Actor award for The Godfather. Instead, he sent Sachin Littlefeather to the stage to protest Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. This act shocked many in the industry and stirred controversy nationwide. Heston, on the other hand, was a staunch conservative who didn't shy away from expressing his political views either. Later in life, he became the president of the National Rifle Association and was known for his strong support of gun rights and traditional American values. While he respected Hollywood and his peers, Heston's politics were often at odds with Brando's more progressive and radical stance. Their ideological differences led to some public and private confrontations. After Brando's Oscar refusal, Heston openly criticized the actor's actions. He saw it as disrespectful to the Academy and the industry, and felt Brando's protest was more about self-promotion than genuine activism. In interviews, Heston described the stunt as divisive and unnecessary, highlighting how the two men simply couldn't see eye to eye on what Hollywood's role should be in political and social matters. Beyond politics, their personalities seemed to clash as well. Brando's rebellious, sometimes unpredictable nature grated against Heston's more traditional, disciplined approach. Heston was known for his commanding presence and straightforward demeanor, while Brando's style was more complex and often unpredictable, making their interactions tense. This mix of personal and political differences meant that their dislike went beyond simple disagreement. For Brando, Heston symbolized everything he opposed about the establishment: conservative, rigid, and unwilling to challenge the status quo. For Heston, Brando was too radical, often seen as disrespectful and self-centered. Still, despite their opposition, both men were hugely influential in Hollywood and left their mark on the industry in different ways. Their rivalry highlights how acting isn't just about talent or fame, but is often deeply intertwined with the times and values that actors live through. Brando's stand on issues and his refusal of the Oscar remain one of the boldest moments in film history, while Heston's long career and political activism left an equally powerful, though very different, legacy. This contrast made it nearly impossible for the two to find common ground. This political and personal divide shaped how Brando viewed Heston, not just as an actor, but as a symbol of everything he wanted to challenge. Their relationship wasn't about competing for roles, but about clashing worldviews, which made the dislike much more intense and enduring. Brando's list wasn't just about politics, it also included actors whose styles or reputations he found insincere. Tony Curtis, the charm that annoyed Brando. Tony Curtis was Hollywood's image of smooth charm and effortless style. He had that classic leading man look, handsome, charismatic, and with a polished persona that made him a favorite in romantic comedies and lighthearted dramas. Curtis's appeal was in his ability to come across as likable and sophisticated, the kind of star who could light up a room with a smile and a witty line. But for Marlon Brando, this kind of charm wasn't exactly something to admire. Brando's world was different. He prized rawness and emotional depth over polished appearances. His acting broke away from the neat, charming leading man stereotype, aiming for something much grittier and more real. In contrast, Curtis's style probably seemed a bit too smooth, too calculated for Brando's taste. To Brando, Curtis's charm might have come off as superficial, an act rather than a true expression of character or emotion. The tension between them wasn't as publicly dramatic as some of Brando's other rivalries, but it was clear from behind-the-scenes chatter and some comments that Brando didn't have much patience for Curtis's approach. Brando was all about authenticity, and Curtis's carefully crafted image might have felt like the opposite of that. There are stories from Hollywood insiders that hint at this irritation. While Curtis was the kind of actor who worked steadily and had a big fan following, Brando was often critical of actors who seemed to prioritize charm and popularity over craft. He felt that the entertainment industry put too much emphasis on looks and charisma, and Curtis, with his suave style, fit right into that category. Brando once reportedly said that some actors perform for the audience, not for the art, and Curtis was often lumped into that group. Whether or not that comment was aimed directly at Curtis, it reflects how Brando viewed stars who seemed more concerned with image than depth. Brando's disdain wasn't personal in the traditional sense, it was more about what Curtis represented in the changing landscape of Hollywood. Curtis himself never publicly commented on Brando's dislike, and the two didn't have many known public confrontations. But the contrast in their careers tells its own story. Curtis stayed in the mainstream spotlight, playing charming, accessible characters, while Brando carved out a reputation as a rebellious, intense actor willing to challenge the system and the audience's expectations. Their different approaches also mirrored two sides of Hollywood in that era: the polished, glamorous world versus the more raw, artistic side that Brando helped pioneer. Curtis's career was built on winning smiles and smooth performances, and while that earned him success and fame, it didn't win Brando's respect. Looking back, Brando's frustration with Curtis is understandable when you consider how much he fought against superficiality in the film industry. For Brando, acting was about stripping away masks, not putting on a charming one. Curtis's charm, no matter how genuine it might have been, probably felt to Brando like a distraction from real emotion and honest storytelling. This tension reveals something important about Brando's mindset. He was less interested in popularity or public image and more focused on pushing acting into new, honest territory. Anyone who seemed to rely too much on charm or surface-level appeal was likely to get under his skin. Beyond persona, Brando's hatred also targeted actors whose professionalism or behavior didn't meet his standards. Richard Burton, The Shakespearean Storm. Richard Burton and Marlon Brando both dominated the acting world, but their approaches and personalities could hardly have been more different. Burton was a powerhouse of classical theater, famous for his booming voice and commanding presence on stage, especially in Shakespearean roles. Brando, meanwhile, brought a raw, instinctive style to acting that shook Hollywood and redefined what it meant to perform on screen. Burton's style was intense, theatrical, and polished. He had years of experience in classical theater, which gave him a grand, sometimes larger-than-life manner. Brando's method acting, on the other hand, was about digging deep into personal emotions and making the performance feel spontaneous and genuine. While both styles are powerful, they come from very different schools of thought, and this contrast was a source of friction between the two. Stories from those who witnessed their interactions often reveal that Marlon Brando wasn't particularly impressed by Richard Burton's classical acting style. Brando, known for his revolutionary approach to acting, reportedly found Burton's performances too formal and rehearsed. He felt Burton's method lacked the raw unpredictability and emotional spontaneity that Brando himself prized above all. Where Burton's style was polished and precise, Brando's was instinctive and lived in the moment. To Brando, acting wasn't about presenting a polished performance for an audience. It was about fully experiencing the character's emotions and reality from within. He believed that true acting should be an honest exploration for the actor, not merely a crafted show for the viewers. In his eyes, Burton's approach sometimes felt more like acting, playing a part for the audience, rather than genuinely becoming the character. This fundamental difference in philosophy led to Brando seeing Burton's work as lacking the visceral, lived-in authenticity that he aimed to embody. Ultimately, Brando valued unpredictability and emotional truth above theatricality, viewing acting as a deeply personal and immersive process rather than a performance polished for external approval. One well-known anecdote involves their time on the set of Cleopatra, where both actors were cast opposite Elizabeth Taylor. The film was notorious for its tensions, and the off-screen clashes between Brando and Burton added fuel to the fire. Brando's unpredictability contrasted sharply with Burton's more disciplined but intense demeanor. Reports from that time describe moments where Brando mocked Burton's theatrical style, suggesting it was outdated in the modern film world. Burton, for his part, was known to be fiercely competitive and proud of his classical training. He reportedly saw Brando's method acting as undisciplined and sometimes self-indulgent. Their differing views on what acting should be led to an uneasy relationship, built more on professional rivalry than friendship. Brando also took issue with Burton's personal reputation. Burton's hard-living lifestyle, heavy drinking, and flamboyant behavior clashed with Brando's own values. While Brando had his share of wildness, he was often more private and guarded. Burton's public scandals and tumultuous relationship with Elizabeth Taylor often made him a target for Brando's criticism. In several interviews, Brando expressed frustration with actors he felt were more concerned with reputation and image than genuine craft. Burton, with his headline-grabbing life, fit that description in Brando's eyes. The combination of theatrical style and public persona made Burton someone Brando couldn't quite respect. Despite these differences, both actors shared undeniable talent and influence. Their rivalry highlights how acting styles and personalities can collide, especially when two strong-willed performers occupy the same space. Burton's Shakespearean storm was powerful, but it didn't align with Brando's vision of acting as a raw and intimate craft. Brando's remarks about Burton often hinted at a deeper discomfort with the theatrical tradition that Burton represented, a tradition Brando sought to break away from. The clash between them wasn't just about personalities, but also about the future direction of acting itself. Finally, the last name on Brando's infamous list brings us full circle, showing the personal nature of some of these animosities. Paul Newman, friendship, rivalry, or disdain. Marlon Brando and Paul Newman shared a complicated relationship that's hard to pin down as simply friendly or hostile. Both actors were huge names in Hollywood, rising to stardom around the same time, each carving out a legacy defined by a mix of charm, talent, and unique screen presence. Yet, beneath the surface, their connection seemed tangled in a web of rivalry, respect, and occasional disdain. Newman was known for his cool, laid-back charm and classic good looks, but he wasn't just a pretty face. He worked hard to earn his reputation as a serious actor and a skilled craftsman, even if his style was a bit more conventional compared to Brando's revolutionary approach. Brando, on the other hand, was the unpredictable force of nature who changed acting forever with his method and intensity. This contrast between the two men formed the backdrop for their often complicated interactions. Their rivalry was never fully public, but there were hints in stories from the era that Brando didn't always see Newman as a genuine equal. To Brando, Newman's success sometimes looked polished and safe, like the kind of star who didn't push the boundaries of the craft as much as he should have. Brando was fiercely protective of what he considered authentic acting, and he wasn't shy about criticizing those he felt were too comfortable or mainstream. At the same time, Brando's relationship with Newman wasn't purely antagonistic. There was mutual recognition of each other's talents. They both understood the pressures of Hollywood stardom and the challenges of maintaining artistic integrity in a demanding industry. Newman's grounded personality and philanthropic efforts earned him respect from many peers, including Brando, though it didn't erase the undercurrent of tension. One revealing moment came from comments Brando made about Newman's fame and public image. Brando sometimes implied that Newman played it safe in Hollywood, sticking to roles that kept him likable rather than taking real risks. This criticism hinted at Brando's deeper frustration with what he saw as the industry's tendency to reward the comfortable and predictable. Newman, for his part, continued to quietly build a career that mixed commercial success with critically acclaimed performances. There were also rumors of jealousy on Brando's side. Newman was frequently cast in roles that emphasized his charm and sex appeal, traits Brando didn't always admire. Brando's disdain sometimes felt personal, perhaps fueled by a sense that Newman's public persona overshadowed the raw, intense kind of work Brando valued. Yet, unlike with some other actors on this list, Brando never outright attacked Newman in public, suggesting a more nuanced mix of feelings. Stories from people close to both men suggest that their relationship had moments of camaraderie, but it was often overshadowed by competition. Newman's steady, consistent success in Hollywood might have rubbed Brando the wrong way, especially during times when Brando was struggling with his own career and personal issues. In this way, their dynamic reflects the complicated balance between friendship and rivalry that can exist among top stars. Despite the friction, it's clear that Brando and Newman shared a mutual awareness of each other's impact on the industry. Both helped define a generation of actors and left legacies that influenced countless performers who came after them. Their relationship, full of contradictions, shows that admiration and dislike can coexist, especially in a high-pressure world where egos and artistry collide. Looking at Brando's feelings toward Newman reveals a lot about how Brando saw the acting profession and the kinds of actors he respected. or didn't. Brando's critique was less about personal hatred and more about what Newman represented in his eyes. A successful star who may have prioritized image and comfort over radical artistic change. Having explored the 7 actors Marlon Brando reportedly hated, what can we learn from these animosities? So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.